Welcome to The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett, where you plus this podcast equals better decisions. I'm Alena Bennett, speaker, author, and leadership expert. I work with chief executive officers and chief financial officers really to help them create universally investable companies where people serve people and the math just works. This week, I'm chatting to Bill Withers, but first, here is my thought-provoking question. My thought-provoking question today for you is, what do you think your business's role is with respect to employee wellbeing? Now, employee wellbeing has kind of become a bit of a thing over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years because we spend so much time at work. Businesses have a philosophical opportunity to help individuals be their best selves, right? And I think quite holistically about business. I think very holistically about people. Businesses have an opportunity to step into that, I guess, ideal, which is, I run a business and I have the opportunity through that business to help people become their best selves. I think, though, with employee wellbeing really, being legislated and mandated to some respect, there is now a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility, sometimes a legal responsibility to take after an employee's well-being. And that's okay. People can follow laws, people can follow, regulations, etc. But I think really the question, and this is really the thought-provoking part of it, is when people come to work, they really bring their personal selves or their personal lives into their professional selves. And so when you are doing work, when you're doing business with somebody, you are actually inherently interacting with someone who's brought their personal life into the workplace. Think I'm talking crap? I mean, we all know what it's like when we've had a really bad morning and we come to work and we just know that we're not our best selves despite our best efforts to compartmentalize and, slam it down into the ether. And so what I see companies do is they sort of flip-flop. They go, oh, yes, sit down, let me talk to you, let me find out how you're going, how you're really going, and let's kind of peel back the onion a little bit because, we know we've got a responsibility to an extent with respect to employee wellbeing, but quite frankly, I also know it's my job as a leader to care about my people. But I think the question is, well, how far do you go? There is some really big stuff going on for people. And the question becomes, how far down do you go? How much grace, how much support do you go before it does tip into I think we've got a performance problem here. And where do you draw the line? I have no answer for you, but I think that is the definition of a thought-provoking question, is where do you draw the line? And I guess that's the practical thought-provoking question. Where do you draw the line? But the more philosophical thought-provoking question is, what do you think your business's responsibility is with respect to employee wellbeing? I look forward to hearing your thoughts. And now to our chat with Bill Withers. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Bill Withers here today. Bill is a seasoned small to medium enterprise SME owner-led from 1987 to present and embarked on a 38-year journey that shaped his understanding of the challenges of leading SMEs. Throughout this period, he led 3 distinct SMEs, each with its unique visions and purposes. Bill discovered that long-term success is centered in building a business that can run without the founder. Bill authored Succession Thinking in 2023, which communicates the need for SME owners to have a stewardship system that delivers what they really want. Bill believes that SME owner leaders that harness their SME advantages can build businesses that deliver what they want and deliver sustained value. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I was really excited to see that I had the opportunity to meet and have a conversation with you because I have a philosophical belief around the power of SMEs in the marketplace today, but I don't have the 38 years of experience and focus and expertise that you do. So I'm really delighted to learn more and to kind of explore that power with you. I'd just love to kind of start from the start and ask, the obvious question, why do you have a special interest and focus on SMEs? And maybe a better question is, what is it about your background and experience that has made this so important for you?
Yeah, well, I think it goes all the way back to my upbringing in the 60s. I'm 65 this year. So I was born in Sydney, but I was brought up in a place called Kununurra in the Kimberley in West Australia. And my folks moved up there. They were originally going to be cotton farmers, but they ended up having a lot of small businesses. I don't know how many in the end. They opened the first general store, the first service station. They built Nina's Jewelry. Anyone that goes through Kununurra, they sell Argyle diamonds and that sort of thing. So they've had lots of different businesses. But when you brought up in this very small community in the 60s, there was about 300 people, and the closest place, it's 3,500 kilometers from Perth, so it's very remote. So you got this feeling of small business and community, So I think that
Um,
that's a something wired in to me. So I remember saying to my folks at 15 that, it's a high probability I'll be in my own business, right?
yeah.
And so at the age of 23, when I came out of university, I went and worked for somebody else, but it was a one-man band, and I said, "Look, I'll work for you, but my intention is to become an owner." And by 27, I was an owner, and then by 30, I was the managing director of that business. So I sort of, but what I started to understand about, I didn't really understand that an SME was different until I was 42. I was 42.
Wow.
So 2003 was when I had a bit of a, I hate that term epiphany sometimes because it's not, you actually have been making observations for quite some time, but it's just that it clicked a bit more in 2003 that SMEs are fundamentally different because and I discovered it because we were deploying enterprise with software companies. So we're deploying enterprise software into corporations. Everyone was telling me that's where you find out how to steward and
Mm.
how to run businesses. And I could see enormous amount of dysfunction. And so I couldn't reconcile those things. I was saying, but all the MBAs and everybody else is telling me that's where you go to find out that's the best. And then I started to understand the difference. In an SME, all the decision rights are in the room. And that is, that's a superpower
Uh-huh.
because it means that you can have coffee or a drink with the vision custodians.
Yeah.
Now, and a vision custodian is a term that, I brought has evolved out of succession thinking. But that concept, if you really think about that and you put enormous work into the construction of a vision, you can maximize the probability that that business will deliver what you want. Now, in no other organization type. Now, I've worked with not-for-profits and I've looked inside enterprises for a lot of my working life. And they don't have, nobody can nominate to me who the vision custodians are because there's a disconnect between leadership and ownership, right? Also, the so a corporation will often have 10,000 owners or many, many owners, whereas an SME tends to be less than three, tends to be,
Mm,
you
mm.
know. So you still have to build a vision and integrate across three people, but that's doable. Whereas trying to capture the vision in a corporation, they do, they nominate directors, but directors are employees. They're not owners, and so the there's a fiduciary responsibility there, but they're really not vision holders. They're they're sort of ephemeral. They're temporal. They're only there for very short periods of time, relatively. Whereas an owner puts their own capital in to actually go after that vision. And there's something wonderful in that sort of, I'm going to deploy my capital to get after my vision. That's something to celebrate. And unfortunately, our society, because of the evolution of pension funds, superannuation, the asset class, we've sort of become more interested in businesses being an investment vehicle than being a value production vehicle.
Tell me about what you mean by a value production vehicle. It sounds wonderful.
Well, because if you go back, I'm reading The Wealth of Nations again, just for the hell of it. But basically, the concept of, and it's a heavy read, I got to say, but it's the concept of value exchange is the principle in capitalism I love, right? And that means that I have a product or a service, and it's the celebration. So most SME owners begin as technicians, right, at something, and they
Yeah.
think I can do that better, right? Or for whatever reason, I want more autonomy and do that, right? Whatever their motivations are, and this is what I mean by vision. But it it's that you know, you look at that value exchange where you build a product or you deliver a service, and then you're paid for it, right? And that's the part, and then the whole algorithm and the pricing and all those concepts in capitalism, that's where capitalism, I think, makes sense.
Mm.
As we evolved, as the bourse, and as we evolved, I mean, the Joint Stock Act was founded in 1848 in the UK, right? But we, the celebration of trading stocks is a pretty young idea, really, right? And just out of interest, I've in my research, when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, the average size of a business was 15, right? So,
Mm.
so I believe that capitalism is broken into, there's a big dichotomy here. So I think I'm an SME capitalist, which I think is entirely different to a lot of capitalism nowadays. A lot of financial capitalism's the other branch, I call it. Now, I understand financial capitalism exists and it needs to exist, and I understand that many big things need lots of capital, and so I appreciate that. I guess what I don't appreciate is how we've truly neglected, really investing in this idea that SME capitalism is different, and we need to understand that we need to build different legislation, different education systems, have different stewardship systems for and the big one, different funding and financial flows for SME capitalism. So I look at the world as, if we can just build this over here, financial capitalism will look after itself,
Yeah.
right? But if we let SME capitalism die, we are destined to oligopoly, monopoly, and duopoly. And that does not seem, and like our regions will die, like you know,
Mhm.
there's just so many good reasons, right? And to build a strong society, to it's capitalism that distributes wealth and power, right? As opposed to concentrating it. And I just don't think that the way we're heading is very healthy. So yeah. So there you go. You've got the background as to why I care.
Well, yes, and I just want to stay at that really macro level because I think that sets a really beautiful context for when we get into the nitty gritty. So, can we just continue a little bit? I'd love to hear your vision for the future. So, when we've got when we get the SME capitalism branch right, what does that look like? How would we know that balance of financial capitalism and SME capitalism, what does that look like? Tell me what the layperson, or maybe what would the layperson notice as different about the ecosystem uh, if and when we got this SME capitalism branch right?
Okay, so at the moment, because we don't have a conscious way of funding small medium enterprises, we have no way to direct the $4 trillion in our superannuation system into the SME economy.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mechanism for that. If we're successful, we will build new banks and and things like patient capital exchanges, a place where an SME can list and it's a dividend market, and that they can get capital, and the way that the investor gets their return, they eventually do get a return on their capital, but in the interim, they get a dividend return. So I would imagine that we have something like the SME 500 or the SME 1000. So it's an index fund. And the
Yeah.
beauty of SMEs is that they're cross geography, cross industry. So you could build an index fund with SMEs. It's just amazing. I mean, outperform the other side. So and by the other side, I'm not having a crack at financial capital. I realize its need to exist. I just think that if we focus on this and we mobilize, if we've mobilized 5-10% of our superannuation fund, and there was asset classes that were starting to bloom in the SME sector, I just feel that our society will start to reap all the benefits. Now, the benefits will be, I believe, we talk about biodiversity, well, we need commercial diversity, right?
Mm.
And another term for financial capitalism is aggregation capitalism. So
Mm.
at the moment, we've got Pac-Man running around buying everything up, and they've got all the money, right?
Yep.
And then the SMEs go, okay, I mean, I'll tell you a story. 2018, I want to build a DApp to go and help other SME owners build high quality stewardship systems. Why? Because if we don't solve the stewardship problem first, if we don't have high levels of SME stewardship, we can never get a dollar. But if we solve the stewardship problem, right, we can then start to, inspire, entrepreneurs into the building of the new banks. We can inspire entrepreneurs into the building of new exchanges, and we can start to mobilize that $4 trillion. Now, all I'm saying is 10%. But 10% of, sometimes I say 5%, but let's go for 10%. 10% of $4 trillion, $400 billion. If you put a $400 billion injection into the SME economy, we would be the most standout country. And I feel that this is for those people that have a more central view on politics and don't want to get polar, right? This is an idea that appeals to the left and the right. I don't know anyone that says, oh no, let's not look after the SME economy, right? The other thing that I've learned is that you are going to slowly but surely crush a lot of innovation if you only fuel aggregation, because corporations are not good at innovating. They just aren't, right? And so consequently, we've built a sort of startup industry that at the moment, I think everybody's an early stage SME, but a lot of people think of themselves as early stage corporations. And I think that my belief is that if we don't watch out, the only place an SME can go is to be bought by a corporation. And if that is the only destination, right, that's a very sad place. Yes, because the owner, what I've learned about SME owners is their visions are extraordinarily rich. They're not,
Mm,
oh, like at the moment, the assumption is make me money, money. Well, I'll tell you that most of these people treat their businesses like their next kid, their other
yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
And so consequently, this idea that because the people in the business that have actually helped them achieve what they wanted with, especially for, financial security, right? The last thing they want to do is see them harmed when the sale takes place,
Mm.
and harmed they are, you know, that's so often. And I think that we just need to be better than that. We need to create, I would have taken a lower valuation and I would have supported the employees to actually acquire at that lower valuation if we had banks, transition capital. And this is a big issue. There's a lot of baby boomer SMEs, and some of
Mhm.
those businesses aren't really that suitable for selling, but they're great businesses creating great value. What's their future?
Like I want to go down all of the rabbit holes, but let me try and make this a little bit coherent so it's a logical follow for those listening to this conversation. You mentioned a stewardship system, so I want to talk about that. But I'm wondering, we say that currently the investment vehicle are the large companies. So, currently we're not investing our super into these SMEs. What is holding SMEs back from participating in the same uh, areas as those bigger companies? And is it related, is that our segue into talking about stewardship? What's holding SMEs back
Yeah,
from participating with the
yeah.
big boys? And is that our transition to the stewardship conversation?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah. So, okay, first of all, let's say, well, what is stewardship, right? Let's go there, right? Because I
Right.
think that's important in understanding what the barriers are at the moment. So, stewardship, I've used the term stewardship because when I wrote my book, I sort of said governance is not appropriate in the SME context, right? So, governance tends to be, I didn't set up my business to regulate, right? I didn't I didn't say, "Oh, I can't wait to get into compliance." I set up my business to go solve a problem, right? I didn't say, "Oh, I want to govern something." No, that's not it, right? I want to get after. So stewardship's more of a nurturing idea. I want to I want to lead a business, right? And I want to take it
Mhm.
somewhere, but I want to use entrepreneurial methodology, which basically means I'm going to go out and experiment, right? I'm going to go out there and so stewardship is a more of a, I just think, a better term. But stewardship relates very specifically what SMEs have, the way they evolve is normally the founder starts as a technician. And at
Mhm.
that instant, when they first start, they're at their most strategic because they're deploying their own capital to get after something. But
Yeah.
then as their business grows, right, the operational demands of the business hijack them, right? And so,
Mhm.
you know, after year 1, year 2, year 3, they are now overwhelmed with a lot of roles in the operations of their business. Stewardship relates to building highly effective owner director team and a highly effective organizational leadership team. Now, when I talk about this, I mean this is the real big decisions that go on in a business. Vision custodians sit on the owner director team, and the vision custodians a role that the owner understands that they need to document the business manifesto, which is a detailed understanding of what the business is going to deliver to them. How does the business deliver? Now, this is sophisticated. It's sophisticated work, but it drives what? You cannot form a strategy without a comprehensive business manifesto. You are forming strategies in a vacuum if you don't have it. Guess how many people are forming strategies in a vacuum? Just about everyone I go into, right? So consequently, their founding story has evolved, and now they have to rebuild this business manifesto, and they have to talk about, well, what do I want to have? What's the future of this share capital? What's the future of the capitalization of the business? I did it with friends and family at the beginning. The business is getting bigger. How do I capitalize my business in service of this vision? Because depending on the dimension of the vision, depends on the dimension of the capital. Now, the capital availability for an SME owner, for my entire life, have had to use my capital, my house, to underwrite my businesses, no matter how successful I was. No matter, it just does not, there's no SME banks, right? So anyway, I'll come back to that. The second part of stewardship, right, is building the capacity to be an organizational leader. And this is a massive undertaking because you need to surround yourself by wonderful organizational leaders that understand that in the SME context, we can't have departments. We can't fracture into little, groups that are politically fighting and all this. They've got to be total system leaders. So they have to be trained. And here's the problem. The only person that's been empirically trained in total system leadership of the business is often the founder. But they don't know that. But the point is, if we can harness building an excellent owner-director team and an excellent organizational leadership team that looks after the formation of strategy and its implementation, cultural leadership, systemization, and leadership development, organizational design. But they can look after that, right? If we can build that high level, we can start to build new ways, lead indicator data on the resilience of the business and the business's capacity to not only produce value this year, but produce value next year. And that's my thesis. So we have the opportunity to build the best type of economic production vehicles. But now, if we can actually prove that they can be built sustainably and they don't have to exit then they become a fantastic investment vehicle. But you can only invest in something that's well run, that's able to supply the necessary data. So this is the sort of numbers I'm talking about, the sort of what you need to be able to supply evidence on leadership development, evidence on culture, evidence on strategic, on the capacity of your leaders to form the strategy and lead the business. You need that's what banks should have been asking me for, but they didn't. They used to always ask me for lag indicator data. They'd ask me for balance sheet and P&L. I said, it's too late. You should be asking me more about my pipeline, right? So that I just can't understand that we aren't sort of evolving in this direction. We know all this, and yet last year, $670 billion, right, of superannuation money went to foreign equities. Now, I mean, it's nuts, right?
Wow.
I mean, how much is getting to the SME? Well, because we haven't built the infrastructure. There's no asset class, right? If you go to your financial planner, go to any financial planner and say, okay, look, I want to invest in the SME economy. Can you please give me the asset classes that I can pick? They don't exist.
Yeah.
And so you can, and people will say, oh, well, yeah, you could set something up and all the rest of it. I said, well, hang on. The majority of people have their money in superannuation in retail funds. And it's not percentage super, right? What percentage Yes, in self-managed super, you can invest, and I do, in SMEs. But that doesn't what about the people that are in retail superannuation?
Yeah.
So I I just think that's just one area. There's a fantastic TED talk given by a German professor, and he talked about why the Mittelstand. Have you heard of the Mittelstand?
No, no, I
Well,
haven't.
see, isn't that interesting, right? We don't know about one of the most productive economic regions of the world, right? Full of SMEs, but we know a lot about Silicon Valley.
Mm, yeah.
Anyway, and I understand why that is, but the Mittelstand is in Bavaria, right? And the, he talks about why, the SMEs, you know, did so well in that region of the world. And they
Mm,
have local SME banks. And the local SME bank has a desire to see the idea come alive, right?
yeah.
So what have we got here, right? Four, I'll be really harsh here, four lazy banks that can make so much money from mortgages that
Mm,
and I know this from a conversation I had with the 2AC of Westpac, that they said, well, we just make too much money from doing that. Why would we take any risks? Why would we try and build SME banks? So
yeah.
at the moment, we've got no real strategies. We'll talk about this. I mean, I'm talking about a vision. We have neither a vision nor strategies for the SME economy that I can
Mm,
that I mean. For instance, in the stewarding of a business, in most Australian states, we pay payroll tax. Why would you impose payroll tax on SMEs? Why? You know, it makes it's when I say no sense, it's actually bullying. They're imposing an expenditure tax for your right to employ people. Your right
mm,
to employ people. I would have thought that the society would want people to be employed.
yeah.
Whereas I think at one stage, my highest number I got to was about $500,000 a year in payroll tax. So that means, and if you're in software or technology, which are the sort of SMEs that we want more of, you actually hit the thresholds for payroll tax very early on. So
Mm.
every additional person you hire is 5.5%. So anyway, sorry, back we go. That I went on a
Well, no,
rant.
I was gonna jump in and say that that's a perfect segue into the technology, because what you've said actually is one of the biggest roadblocks to, but SMEs being able to participate in that way in the market was because there was no lead. When you go to the bank, they're only looking at lag indicators. They're looking at short term they're looking at the traditional SME, short term exit, sale, etc. And you said there was a lack of lead indicators to tell banks, tell the story around the enduring value that could be delivered by these companies. And you talked about how you, through Adapt, have created a system that does that. I would love to explore, what does the system do? You talked about, the evidence on leadership, the evidence on culture. Tell me about this system that you have created through the company Adapt, and what it does and how it sort of starts to get us from this real conceptual vision of the future to how do we support SMEs to actually get there?
I'm going to ask you a question here. How do we organize ourselves? And what's the way that most people think about how to organize yourself in business? So, and there's a reason I'm asking the question. What do you think the standard response to that is or is?
They would say by function. We've got, we sell these different, and then that can be different. It can be functionalized by, technology, finance, operations. It could be by product. We sell X, Y, and Z. But it would be quite functional in that sense.
Yeah, but your response is actually even more sophisticated than I get, right? Because most people have a mental model. The way they organize, the first thing they'll show me is their org chart, right? So an org chart, right? So you say, okay, an org chart is a power hierarchy. The way it's drawn even, right? Person at the top, and
Yeah.
then there's some people, then there's people, there's people. Okay. So if you're
Yeah.
gonna get a really, really wonderful culture in a business, right? Would you put in an org chart? If you What I'm stating here is the SMEs have the opportunity to build adult to adult cultures, adult to adult cultures. Get rid of this parent to child culture, right? Now, if you're going to
Yes.
build, so consequently, culture is directly related to how you organize yourself, right?
Mm.
If culture is directly related to how you organize yourself and you need to build a flatter system without losing accountability, how do you do it? So what we believe is that a network of teams where you have teams, and teams aren't teams of people first, they're teams of roles. Roles. Roles are the magic
Mm.
that an SME can build. They become the critical component in building your business. That's where you put accountability. So accountability is packaged in roles, and roles sit on teams. And then teams interact. And yes, they can be in functions or they can be in value streams. But what you start to do is organizational design is fundamental to culture, and culture is fundamental to
Mm.
organizational design. So if you just go down the route of, and this is the other big part that we've got a problem with, our education system says that we are all the same. And you go and see an MBA, and these people come in from MBAsville or from Corporatesville into an SME and say, well, geez, there's no way we're going to do it like that. So I challenge
Mm.
people to even get rid of the C-suite. Don't use HR. These are horrible terms that have come from a totally different world, right? Why would you use them?
Mm.
Because CEO and see this and all that. But no, we got to build flatter organizations, but without losing accountability, right? Now, if you build flatter organizations, if you build an adult to adult culture, what's an adult to adult culture? Intrinsic motivation. Build businesses where people want to be there because they want to be there. Don't do anything coercively. Any coercion leads to hostageship, right? I mean,
Mm.
hostageship is horrible. If somebody is in a job just because they're getting coin, that won't last for them or the business, right? If you want to build great, great businesses, land wonderful people that will be there for the long term. So the consciousness of building an adult to adult culture, as soon as you build parent to child culture, I just it's all over. I think it's as simple as
Mm.
that. You cannot.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to build the leaders of tomorrow in a business where they're being treated as a child. And unfortunately, our society has become, the level of leader driven victimhood is ridiculous. I mean, if you look at the evolution of OH&S in a corporation, I mean,
Mm.
if you go back 20 years or go back 30 years, there would have been a much higher expectation of personal responsibility. But we're
Mm.
just eroding that because we've got very poor leadership. I mean, and the larger the company, right, the greater the problem, because it's impossible to build flat structures in large corporations. And they
Mm.
even set up their remuneration system. So in Acquire, I set my salary couldn't be greater than 4.5 times the lowest paid person in our business, right? That that was the model. The reason
Mm.
for that is your remuneration system as an owner, I had the opportunity for the distribution of the dividend, but my salary
Yes.
was at 4.5 times. They're building a remuneration system where you say you're going to pay somebody 100 times more, right? That's a power hierarchy. So and
Yeah.
so then they put lipstick on the bulldog, and then they say, okay, right, let's talk about culture. Well, no, they're going to change the whole way there. So the SME advantage, We got all this in our hands. It's all available.
Mm.
We have these businesses that are, between 20 and 200. Perfect, right? We can design them in totally different ways. We are unconstrained. Only our imagination is our constraint. So
Yeah.
this is the problem. Why are we taking our fundamental advantages and destroying them by implementing corporate constructs? Makes no sense to me.
Tell me then. I want to get into to the data that you're able to unleash through the companies that you work in, and then talk about what does success look like for SMEs. What I'm trying to do is take us on a journey from we've gone really big picture. We've started to talk about entity. We've started to talk about structure. And we've actually started to talk about people. And I really like that idea of adult to adult culture. I think it's very clever and makes a lot of sense. I want to get even more granular and talk about, so how do the data flows, and what does success look like financially and non-financially for SMEs? Because I think what's very helpful about this conversation, Bill, and I'm learning a lot, is you're lifting the lid under the hood for what we didn't even know. We didn't know this stuff.
Yeah, that and that's what we find when we go into SMEs. But
Mm.
what I think is, I'm going to get to answer your question very quickly, but I will say that one of the things in doing this work with Adapt is how I felt like I've been swimming up a waterfall because of the incredible power of the education for everyone being driven to a specific mental model of what business looks like. And that means that you actually have to help the owner say, well, hang on,
Yeah.
you have done incredibly well here. You've deployed your own capital to get after a vision, and you've built a business of 50. It's brilliant, but it doesn't necessarily sometimes mean, well, a lot haven't ended up where they wanted to end up, right? So success is, yes, the financial security that creates the wealth to do what you want to do, but
Mm.
it's no good if you end up being on the hamster wheel. And it's no good
Yep.
if you have no succession for your leadership. It's no good if you have no succession for your share capital. It's no good if you are stuck. It's no good if you're overwhelmed. It's no good if you're lonely. Now, these are the cons. This is often where SME owners end up, right? Because and guess what? If you've got the power hierarchy and you're at the top and everyone else is a child, well, you've just guaranteed yourself that that business is harder to sell, right? Because there will definitely be covenants on you.
Yep.
It's a business that you haven't developed the leaders to to take to take on that business. There's just so many. So okay, let's go back and talk about data and what it is that we've done at Adapt. We've done at Adapt, it's been hard, but we've built a platform that allows you to build the network of teams, build roles, pin roles to teams, pin roles to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And track the intrinsic motivation of the people. So if you track the intrinsic motivation of people, you say to them, so we call it the career evaluation system. So what it is, and by the way, about 10,000 cultural catch-ups have been done using this system since we built this. So across, I think we've got about 130 customers at the moment, 130 SMEs.
Mm.
But so what we do, and I learned this it's in my book, but in 2005, I learned that a person that I really respected and really had an employee that I thought was going to be a leader of tomorrow, um, came to me and said, "I'm leaving." And when he told me this, I was very, very flat, but I just started asking questions. And I assumed that because this guy was a athlete, an Enviro Challenge athlete, and he has to train, he would have taken another job in the city. But he didn't. He took a fly-in, fly-out job. And I thought, but how? I was going, I couldn't reconcile this. I thought, how's this guy going to train? So I went into a room and this just got invented on the fly. I put up 100 points. I said, you got 5 categories and 100 points to distribute them. And I said, professional fit, personal fit, cultural fit, money, and training, right? There was 5 criteria at the time. There's 7 now. But I gave him that, and he distributed them across. And I knew that professional fit and personal fit and cultural fit would figure highly, even though money figured. So anyway, he did it. And then I said, okay, I want you to mark us, mark acquire. Tell us how well we're going. And he told us. And I said, now you're going to have to make some assumptions on the basis of the place you're going to. He did it. So we increased his salary marginally. He was going to get given nearly double his salary to go to this other job. We did increase his salary marginally. He gave the other company 37 points and us 75. So he stayed because he had a decision tool to understand his own motivation. And so that became central to the way it was the big learning for me, is that any form of coercion in leadership is useless and get rid of it. My job as a leader is to get that person to the place that they're going to be happiest, whether it's inside the business or outside the business. But I need data. So
Yes.
what I'm starting to, and this is the part that I'm getting to, is that data for culture is as important as data so talk about numbers. This is what I mean about, people numbers. Well, I'm
Yeah.
talking about people numbers. So this sort of intrinsic motivation concept, it's still incredibly young, even though, I've been doing it since 2005 in some form, right? And Adapt deployed the technology in 2016. So but this whole idea of signing up to an intrinsic motivation, adult to adult culture, depending on your worldview, that can be incredibly challenging.
I love that, depending on your worldview, because I think through this conversation, you've really illuminated that many of our worldviews have been shaped by the done thing. I'll just call it the done thing. Um, I'd like to kind of stay where we're at here, because you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. There is this real nuance to this idea of the real math of business. So the way me and my business look at it is we help our clients build universally investable companies where people serve people and the math just works. So in our mind, there's a 50-50 interplay. But you've got this real nuanced view, which I think you've started to flesh out. I just want to round out this conversation by maybe asking you for a headline ratio, which I understand is nuanced. But if you can give us a headline ratio, what's your people versus numbers, real math of business ratio? And then, given the conversation we'd have, I'd love to tease out the nuances in that.
Okay, well, let me share with you just to get to this number, and you can perhaps help me form it, right? So
Fab. Love it.
for organizational leaders, we believe that most people think of their business as the economic engine, right? And unfortunately, historically, accountants didn't help this because they said everything else was overhead, right? Whereas I believe that the foundations of an economic engine are financial security, finance, leadership, culture and people, and organizational design. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want a healthy if you want a healthy economic engine, you better be building this infrastructure well, or you will end up with an unhealthy economic engine, right? So if you look at it, there's numbers associated with finance, there's numbers associated with leadership, culture, and people.
Mm-hmm.
There's numbers associated with organizational design, and then there's the critical numbers associated with the critical customer flow in the economic engine. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a data guy, right? I believe in
Absolutely.
evidence, right? And so if if and the evidence is the only way to establish objective truths, right? And if how do you lead anyone with, and this is why the world's turned into chaos, because we just don't seem to we agree on even what an objective truth is anymore. But anyway, that's another topic.
Yeah, that's
The
that's the next
no, no,
episode.
no, no, no. But anyway, so for me, I find it difficult to answer that question because I go, well, you know, it maybe is 50-50, but when we talk about numbers, we've got to elaborate what numbers we mean. You see
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going with that? So the because that's why I find that tricky.
So it's maths. I think, and this is why this conversation is so good. It's interesting, and I'm just talking out loud here, Bill. So let's riff off each other
Yeah.
if we can for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest of
yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, if I reflect on the conversation that we've had and what I've learned, there is definitely a math problem, a financial math problem that has led to this context that we're in, where you're, bashing your head against the wall going, guys, we're forgetting about this whole beautiful industry of SMEs that could create real value for us, right? That's a real math problem. Yeah. And then what you've gone and done, and I totally oversimplifying everything that you said. So I do this with no disrespect, but just for trying to land the plane a little bit in my head. Um, then you've said, one of the biggest roadblocks for putting the SMEs on the same stage as the financial capitalism companies, let's call them, for ease, is banks just ask for, give me a financial history, which is all, as you say, lag indicators. There is no good data and evidence to say this is why this SME is going to not only be around for a good time, but for a long time. And this is why it's investment worthy. And so that's when we start to talk about this data, these lead indicators of future financial sustainability, growth, and wealth creation, right? And what you've said is the power of what you've done in Adapt and what you've created in Adapt and what you learned through Acquire was how you can put data, evidence, data, and therefore numbers to these to the people side of the equation to solve for ultimately a math. I'll say a math problem, but it's actually a math expectation gap or a math awareness gap.
Yes.
Um, So have I kind of so I
Yes.
guess
No,
all I did was
I
kind of
think this is really
synthesize our
good. I think
conversation.
that now let's talk about those numbers because I
Yeah.
do think I think that this will be a massive breakthrough when we start to measure companies correctly, because short-termism has driven the P&L balance sheet
Of course.
analysis, right? Well, so
Absolutely.
as soon as you start to play the long game, you understand that the maths changes radically, right?
Yep.
Because to talk about the future of a business, we don't know, and this is where the short termists go, "Oh yeah, but you don't know." I go, "No, we don't know. But what we can do is we can make ourselves match fit for different habitats, right? So if we take a
Yes.
biological metaphor,
Yep.
we can
Yep.
actually build businesses that have the capacity to be agile, tough, move, etc.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
for instance, just to give you an insight, in Acquire, we built a future fund. That future fund, I was as in my role, I was the only one that could sign off on the use of those funds, and that was to navigate downturns in the mining industry. So you can build businesses where you think about lots of different things, and I wanted to build that business so that in downturns I didn't have to retrench people, right? So,
Mm,
so
mm,
consequently, what I'm getting at is that once you start getting into that long-term thinking, then all the numbers start to being able to see the capability of the organizational leadership team and measure it, right? We can
mhm,
do that.
mhm.
So at
Yep,
any instant in Adapt, I'm not on the organizational leadership team, I'm on the owner team. As an owner,
yep.
I can go in and see how well is it traveling. And it will show me, oh, we've had a bit of a drop here. What's causing that? And I can look at the data and make decisions and then
Mm,
say, go to the
mm.
organizational leaders and say, okay, what's this about? Right. So there's
Yep,
there's determining the capability and the alignment of the organizational leaders. There's I can
yes.
look at data that gives me a quick shot of the culture across the business, or I can look at the aggregations of the intrinsic
Mm,
motivation data, and I can see where
yeah,
people's motivation, the aggregated motivations are, and the aggregated of how well we're delivering. And if we have a fall in, say, training. So people are valuing training and we have a fall. Well, I know that the organizational leaders now have a strategic input to actually change how we're doing training so that we can fix that number. Anyway, there's there's so much data once you want to play the long game because
yeah.
it's all about the other thing is if you don't create role mobility, right? Another thing that if you're a short termist, you don't care. If you're a long term, if you think for the long term, you want to
Yeah.
think about the team member journey, right? The team member journey is an employee is going to enter, be engaged, and exit, the three E's of culture, right? Now you need to think about that entire thing, right? And so if you can actually understand and measure that,
Mm,
you can actually create a career for somebody inside your business. So people can stay for long periods of time because you have role mobility, role mobility. But you can't have role mobility if you haven't established the infrastructure for roles. So our platform stores the data on roles so that you can then actually create the necessary mobility. Role mobility
mm,
is a very important thing if you want to, just because I know this data now, right? That's
yeah.
a real big thing for people. So if they can see that I enter in this role, but I have the opportunity to go to that role, that's a big thing. Now, SMEs
Huge.
historically haven't perhaps thought that way. And so the person just
Yeah.
says, I'll just leave, right? The other trap with the org chart is that it's better to think about a business in plan, not in cross section. So it's more about the relationships between the the people, but the
Yes.
relationships between roles and teams. When you start thinking about that, there's all sorts of
Mm,
anyway. I'm starting to get it, but there is a lot of data that you can measure. And here's the thing, right? If you're a founder and you can build a business that runs post founder without you having to sell it, you've hit that is the
that's it.
best possible place because you can still sell it in the future, but you get all your discretionary time back, right? You can
Mm,
get your dividend return and
yep.
and you're creating opportunity for the development of stewards, not just not operationalists, people that you give the decision rights to for the formation of strategy and for taking the business forward. I believe the future of in the SME economy is that we invest a lot in how to build great team leaders in our businesses and how to build great
Mhm.
organizational leaders. And those, and measure that.
I think we need another conversation, Bill. But to really land this plane, I'm going to throw something out there. I'm not going to attribute numbers. I would like you to attribute the ratio. But it feels to me that where we have landed in this conversation is that your ratio is highly, highly people driven with the asterisks. The reason why you have the luxury to have a high people to math ratio is because you've got the numbers, you've got the data embedded in your people part of the pie. That's my hypothesis with where your numbers might go, because the way you talk about org design role, but the way you talk about the distinction, the important distinction between the owner director team and the organizational leadership team, it is all about the people. It seems to me the difference is that you have done the work to identify and capture the data, the numbers that sit within the people part of the pie, and that's what makes the maths work. So that's my hypothesis. Over
No,
to
no,
you.
that's it. That's it. That and I think that what I would just pick up is in the people, right? A lot of what I'm talking about is recognizing that a business, all the people won't be there in the businesses I'm helping people build. There'll be new people. You see where I'm going? But
Correct.
that's right. So everything you said is correct. It's just that a lot of this is about infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Infrastructure and people, right? So it's not there is a method to this. There's a way that you can deploy this. There's a way that other people can make use of this. It's not Bill Withers, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. So tell me, I'm going to put the spotlight is right on you, Bill. What's your ratio, people to math?
75-25.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Bill, this has been an absolute cracker of a conversation. Thank you. I've learned so much, and I'm really inspired by the work you and Adapt are doing. Can you tell us how we learn more about you? You've got your book, Succession Thinking, but if I wanted to go further than the book and have a chat with you, or to really learn on the ground, what does it mean to embed, or to learn, to get this data for my company? How would they contact you, Bill, or
Yeah.
find you?
Well, the website's theadaptway.com. And what I tend to do is everything goes through I still work actually as an owner mentor, but that's in a discretionary time. I value discretionary time now, um, a lot. So I only take on a certain number of customers per annum in doing that work. So what I recommend is to go to the Adapt website and then or contact Adam Wilts or Gabe Enslin.
Mm-hmm.
And Gabe is the leader of Adapt and is a fellow vision custodian and a fellow owner. So Adam
Yeah.
is the leader of our business development. Um, uh,
Okay.
but
Got it.
but what I do recommend is that if my book's available on the platforms, but there's also an audiobook on the platforms as well. So if people want
Okay.
to engage with that,
Yeah.
there's I have done some other writing out there. There's a article in the Australian Institute of Company Director where magazine where I actually make the case for separating the the SME context. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, that's so I'd recommend contacting Adapt, and then we can take it further from there.
Go from there. So that's theadaptway.com,
Yes,
and speak to either Gabe or Adam.
that's correct. That's correct.
Wonderful. Bill, thank you so much for this illuminating chat. I've learned so much. Thank you for drilling down from way, way, way big to way, way, way small to a ratio.
Yeah.
You've done so well. This has been wonderful. I look forward to following your work and having you on again soon.
Well, I really appreciated this, Alena, and perhaps we should catch up again and have a chat, because I think the other thing that I really do believe is that like-minded people in this area, we've got to actually start to build a bit of a coalition, because if we don't, at the moment, I think the rate of SME growth is decreasing, and so I just think that if we're going to do something, the time is nigh.
Let's hold hands and do it together, hey?
Yep, that sounds great.
I love it. Thanks so much, Bill.
Okay,
Take
see you
care.
later.
And what a great chat with Bill Withers. Which leads us right into our listener question. And if you want to submit a listener question, you can now email us at realmathofbusiness@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and we'll hopefully get it into a future episode. This week's listener question for this episode is from YouTube, from user at Curtis T1019 from YouTube. Hey, Curtis, thanks so much for following along. Your question is, what part of the numbers side of a business do you find most interesting? That's a great question. I don't have a number that's my favorite. I don't have a metric that is a favorite. In fact, I typically have a bit of an eyes glaze over moment when I hear the traditional metrics, if I'm perfectly honest. What I am most interested in looking at with respect to the numbers is numbers that stay the same. And I ask myself the question, why has that stayed the same? What's going on there that really has made this number stay the same? I look at, I'm really interested in the story behind the numbers. So I really, in my head, try to reconcile, what do I know about the business, whether that be based on what someone's specifically told me, or what I know anecdotally or intuitively or instinctively. So there's a part of my brain that goes, what do I know about the business? And then what do these black and white numbers tell me? And there's sort of something that goes inside my brain that's a little bit of a bullshit radar. And so what I'm trying to do is go, where's my bullshit radar going on, and what number is triggering that radar going off? And then the other thing I'm looking for is trends. And I'm really looking for where trends repeat. I think the economy and the market has not been consistent. It has been very rarely predictable in the last kind of 5-10 years. And so I'm really looking for those areas where I see the same trend repeating itself. So the numbers might be different, but the trend is the same. And when I see the trend being the same, and then when I see the narrative or the story is the same, again, I put my hand up and go, what's going on here, guys? For me, I'm kind of, I guess, excuse the French, I'm looking for that bullshit radar, and I'm using that to go, what numbers am I most interested in, and what's the conversation that I'd like to have? Not because I think that the business is hiding something or doing something wrong. For me, it's about painting that complete picture of the story so that I can be comfortable that, my understanding is being reflected in the numbers in the most useful way. I hope that helps, Curtis. Great question. Thank you for listening to The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett. If you liked this episode, remember to subscribe for more content and stay on top of The Real Math of Business. I've been Alena Bennett. Thank you so much for listening.